All right, the March 17 meeting of the Sandusky Landmark Commission will come to order. Roll call, please.
Dr. Berkey?
Here.
Mr. Lawrence?
Here.
Commissioner Meinzer?
Here.
Mr. Griffiths?
Here.
Mr. Galea?
Here.
Mr. Nagel?
Here.
And Mr. Whaley?
Here.
All right, first item is a review of the February 17, 2021 meeting minutes. Do we have any changes? If not, may I have a motion to accept? Yes.
There's a couple of errors in the names of the applicants for 101 and 109 East Water Street. That should be David Beer and Dawson Foster. It's not correct.
Okay, thank you. Any others? If not, I need a motion to accept. I didn't hear. Did we get a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept.
Thank you. Thank you. All those in favor of approving the March 17 meeting minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Minutes approved. All right, we have 4 applications this evening for certificates of appropriateness. The first is 125 East Water Street. Mr. Horsman.
Jim West, Jim's Pizza Box.
Is now joining.
There you go. Looks good.
Dragon.
Go ahead. This is Michael McCombs. I'm sitting in on behalf of Brian Casper. As stated by Mr. Horsman, it'll be the same material used as the penthouse structure, and it is a code-based modification. Other than that, if anybody had any other questions that I could answer, feel free to ask.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
question for the applicant. How was this missed previously? I mean, this is a rooftop bar, you know, occupancy, I don't know what the occupancy is, but it seems like 2 points of egress is kind of a given on this. And I apologize, I was not at the October meeting, so I did not see this project before. But, you know, this ad seems like something that would have been discovered in an SD level drawing set.
The architect came back to us when we started to go over initial construction drawings and pointed out some code requirements that he had initially missed. And from the beginning, it was more of a 3D conceptual. And then when we got into the structural and construction drawings to hand over to the contractors, that's when the minute details were just, you know, really dug into, and we discovered that we needed to add this second point of egress to the commercial space.
So this is Jeff Foster. I'm actually on here for a different application, but I can speak to this as well. When the project was presented to you last, we didn't necessarily understand it was going to get presented as a final design. So that design had not been fully vetted in a lot of different ways. So originally the occupant load of what this was going to be was such that it would have been fine with one stair, but the project evolved since then, and as it did and as it unfolded with its details, we came to this requirement.
Fine, does that satisfy your question?
Yeah.
Tom, do you have any comments? Do you have any reaction or comments? Anything to add? Okay. How about any other commission members? Any other questions? Discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I mean, this preservation guidelines, I mean, this is not set back. I mean, this is a pretty significant visual modification, in my opinion, on a primary elevation of the building. It doesn't step back. You know, I've seen a lot of dog houses that go up to roofs for stairs. We just finished one on a project for mine at work. You know, it's quite a different setback than the rest of the proposed rooftop structure. And I mean, it's just a box. I mean, that's quite an appendage on an otherwise, I think, nice design. And I mean, I don't love it, to be honest with you.
Well, I have a similar question, and that is, you know, it's difficult in drawings, but from the street level, how much of that do we see?
So there's your view in the upper left-hand corner of that 3D view page. I mean, that's the view that you see. So to be clear as well, you know, we wish this didn't have to be here either, clearly. And one of the things that we have been most excited about with the way the penthouse is unfolded is the color scheme that we used on the siding that's on the penthouse, and that is also on the existing stair that's to the rear, is that gray color that was intentionally used to help it blend in with the sky. Obviously, these 3D views that you're seeing here are black and white against a blue sky, but we intentionally used that siding color that's up there. So as you look up from the street view, and that view that you see in the upper left-hand corner is as if you were standing in the middle of Water Street looking up.
Yeah, that was my next question.
So that is where the stair is on the inside of the building. So, you know, we don't really have a choice of pulling it back at all. We did intentionally keep the cornice, you know, as from our prior approvals on the other iterations of this building. When we first implemented the penthouse, we kept that cornice along Water Street intact. And there's about a 3 foot overhang of that is that cornice that extends along the streetscape elevation of the building. So as you look up, and as you look up from the sidewalk line, that really is the most prominent element that you see, is the cornice that extends across.
So our standards speak to the degree to which a rooftop structure dominates the architecture of the building. And I'd like to hear Tom's thoughts on that and any commission members. May I hear from other members on this?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm just a little curious. What was the tipping point, the occupancy load, I'm assuming it's assembly, that put it over to the second stairwell? Does anybody, maybe nobody knows that, I don't know.
It's the assembly use. When this was put together prior, it had one stair, which was a stair that served the residential units, which is when it was constructed. And as I had mentioned earlier, what we had presented to Mr. Casper and what he took to you for was a preliminary design, and it hadn't been fully vetted through, and it hadn't even been taken really to the DD level that this would have been identified in a full code review. So that's why we're in the situation that we're in.
So that the use group changed to assembly. And then I just had another question. Are the stairwells, are they non-combustible, or are they smoke pressurized, or?
They're not pressurized. They're non-combustible.
They're non-combustible stairwells.
Yeah, they're all steel and concrete block.
Okay. I just thought, is there some sort of an arched window or something you could throw on there that would match the facade of the other buildings?
Well, we intentionally did not articulate this because the other portion of the NPS guideline says that any additions to a historic building need to be clear that they're additions, and it needs to be clear that they're modern construction. So we intentionally didn't, add any material that's brick. We didn't add any material that's stone. We didn't articulate that stair at all. We really tried our darndest from a materiality standpoint to make that thing blend in with the sky.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I have a little bit different interpretation of that. I don't read it as necessarily modern. I read it as that when you look at the building, you know that it wasn't part of the original. I don't think that completely locks the door on doing something that associates itself more with the older part of the building. Any other thoughts? Any further discussion?
I had a question. So are you just saying that that's something that you're looking for was a difference, like to the facade of that?
Well, let's go back to Mike.
Hello.
Commissioner Mike.
Hello, yes, Mike. Well, I was just, one, I know we're going to have more and more rooftop bars coming up, and I just wanted to be clear that stairwells were non-combustible and fire rated doors at each level, and that's going to be a requirement moving forward. And two, personally, I mean, I'm not real familiar with the historical part of it, but I just think that as Mr. Nagel said, it just, I don't know, it just sticks out there like a sore thumb. And I understand setting it back is going to create all kind of design problems and access problems. So I'm just trying to throw some things out there that I thought might stick.
Thank you.
Ryan, do you have any ideas?
I'm sorry, Dr. Me?
Ryan Nagel, excuse me.
Oh, yeah.
I don't. I mean, this is a tricky one.
Yeah.
I have a thought, just a bit to the contrary. We're really focused on Water Street, and certainly that isn't basically the space, the step back from the edge of the building. But really, when you look at this from shoreline, and our city is really displayed from the water. That's how a lot of folks get here. That's how a lot of folks are spending time on the bike path. A lot of folks spend time on the bay. It's not that far of a drive from what we've already approved on the shoreline side. So although I don't love it, I feel like it's not a major distraction from the rest of the design.
I guess my concern is that we are getting more and more rooftop applications. And I think one of the things that's critical for us to continue to keep our eye is street level view, whether it be on the water side or the formal street side.
Mike Watson.
And
Roberto
this one creates a dilemma.
Is now joining.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if I can fully support this based on the street view and the standards. It's a tough one for me.
Anyone
Mr.
else?
Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it's on. I guess this arises because the original application was submitted without a essentially finalized set of drawings.
Right.
So that's probably something for us to note for future deliberations.
Yes.
I guess I don't love this as an addition or even how it's going to look necessarily, but my general view, I think, is that this overall restoration project on these two buildings has been so significant and contributes significantly to the restoration of important structures downtown. I'm kind of with Ryan on, I don't like it, but it's not a deal breaker for me.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say before Alan, I mean, to me, the whole project is beautiful. So I would say 95% of it looks amazing. It's that 5% that we're just stuck on right now because we really haven't had a lot of time to think of alternatives. But I don't want to hold the project up. I'd like to see the thing move forward, and think I probably could support it. And with the parameters that were laid out about not trying to mimic the original structure, I guess I can see that. It's an abstract. If you're going to go on the streets, it's obvious somebody did something different. But overall, I think most people will look at that and think it's a beautiful project, I think, overall.
So from the applicant's perspective, one thing I want to add from the applicant's perspective as well is, had we vetted this fully at its initial presentation, you would have seen the stair just like you see today. Because unfortunately, just from a technical aspect, the stair is there. That's where the second stair is. And with the way that the building stacks up, unfortunately, we're kind of stuck with where it is. So I just want to add that from an applicant standpoint.
Any other thoughts? Does anyone have a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would move that we grant the certificate of appropriateness for this particular application.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
I guess, Mr. Chairman, my only further comment would be I'd maybe encourage staff to work with the applicant on how this, how this is going to look as a final product.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Just in support of my own motions, I hadn't spoken on this issue previously. I agree with the prevailing sentiment that, this is an important project for downtown. We may not love the aesthetics of it, but it's probably important to contextualize this in the greater scheme of the project as a whole. I think perhaps what we need to do is perhaps staff, when an application comes in, or if we know somebody's got something in the works, is to make sure that some of this level of review is done for code purposes, because we might have had some different thoughts, different ideas if the project were coming to us in its embryonic stage when we initially approved that application for a rooftop deck. And some of these things might be alleviated. Maybe we'd kind of come up with some other solution other than the stairwell. Maybe would have been disguised better, or whatever the case may be. Seems to me that if you come to us too early, I understand an applicant might want some early feedback from us as a commission to see if we're going to be in favor of something before spending the money for that further review. But at the same time, if that further review is going to lead to changes that now are putting us in a position of, do we schedule the whole project over a stairwell? That becomes a problem too. So I think, it's important to have these staff dialogues with applicants to see, did we really cross every T dot every I, and are we comfortable that this is going to be final? There's not going to be some, hidden thing once we do the review for code purposes. So, I guess just maybe a note to staff or any applicant that might be, listening into this conversation.
I think that's a good point. And some of you expressed to me a need to carve out time in a future meeting where we talk about some of these issues to better inform our applicants in terms of what we need and in our own internal processes in terms of making things go a little smoother. Any other discussion? We did get a second, can we?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, I know there's a motion on the floor. I may be out of order, but I apologize. But a thought came to mind when Mr. Griffiths mentioned, and well, I guess Mr. Galea also, but maybe working with Tom, something with the Arts Council, that might be a nice place for some artwork or something to just doctor it up a little bit. They might have, they've got some grants right now for artwork, so, and a sculptor, maybe there's something on the front of that ties into Sandusky or something might help.
Okay, I'm going back. Alan, did you second that motion?
I think Ryan did.
I did, yep.
Whaley.
Is that correct, Ryan?
Yes, I second that.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Berkey?
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence?
No.
Commissioner Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Griffiths?
Yes.
Mr. Galea?
Yes.
Mr. Nagel?
No.
Mr. Whaley?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Good luck. Next applicant is 301 West Water Street. Mr. Horsman. Jeff, you want to add some additional comments?
Yes, I will. Jim West is, I think, on the line. He was going to make a few words to the board here before I start going into that. Jim, you want to just give a little bit brief overview?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, as Tom mentioned, we do want to put a restaurant in there, and we were able to acquire the building off of Mr. Ackerman after about 7 months of me trying to talk him into selling the building for this purpose. What we have right there basically is a shell. I mean, just to be able to get this going, we got quite a bit of work to do structurally. But as Mr. Host, Tom said, it is going to be a semi-phased approach. However, everything you see here, we want to shore up the building and take care of the exterior aesthetics in the first phase. There's some interior design work that we want to do that would be in the later phases. But what you see here is pretty much what's going to happen in the first phase. But with that being said, I appreciate your time and consideration. And unless there's any further questions for me down the road, I'll turn it back over to Jeff.
Great, thanks. I'm going to take you through a few technical aspects of the job. As Jim had mentioned, these two buildings have been vacant for a while. The Feddersen / Sandusky Butter and Egg building, it was originally a beer distributor. That has a concrete floor on the first floor, and the upper floor and roof are wood structure. So that building had originally doors on the front and the side that were a loading dock on the side, and they actually drove trucks in on the first floor. So as Jim had mentioned, the approach here is phased, but what you see here is an exterior envelope restoration, and then we're going to be doing, at the very least, all of the structural work that has to do with the rooftop deck, and also rebuilding the back wall. So starting on the Water Street elevation, and we'll kind of stand on the plan that's on your screen, in the lower right-hand corner, that's what faces Water Street. So we'll be removing all of that aluminum siding that's on the front of the 3-story building. Below that is cut limestone. So our intent with that is to repoint that, do any repairs that need to be done. It appears that the eyebrows, there's some stone eyebrows that were originally built with the building. They appear to still be there. There may be a little patching and repairing we need to do with those, but the intent is to keep those, as with the cornice. The cornice will remain. We'll do a little restoration work with that, and that will likely get a new coat of paint. On the first floor, unfortunately, someone had hacked the garage door in at some point in the building's life, which removed a couple of the cast iron columns. But we took an approach that's more of a sensitive approach than a try and rebuild approach. So what this will be the new entrance to what is both buildings. So if you look at your floor plans, you've got an entrance lobby that has an elevator on your left, and then it has a stair straight ahead of you. So one of the challenges with this building is that it has only one stair currently. So we'll stay on the theme of stairs here. Is the building we're adding 2 new stairs to it. So there'll be a new stair and elevator tower that goes up all 3 stories. And then there's another stair that we're adding to the back of the building that will go up 3 stories as well. So where we're infilling at the garage door, we'll be done with some trim, whether that's AZAC or composite wood, with some real simple windows that are a reference to some of the sizes and types that would have been typical on a building of this age. Over to the Feddersen building. The main character of this building, I mean, if you had to define the characteristics of this building, it's the brick style, it's the patterning which was laid up, and it's the articulation of the windows. So it's important for us to maintain that all the way around the building. One of the things that's very deceptive about this, at first glance, you don't necessarily notice, but the entire east wall of the building, which faces out towards where our deck is, that masonry is all failing. When it was installed, had no brick ties, years of freeze and thaw and failures of lintels and lack of flashings and such have caused it to delaminate. So we are going to be rebuilding probably 75 to 80% of the brick that's on that east facade. Our intent is to resalvage the brick that comes off. So you can see that we're creating some larger openings on the first floor. And what that allows us to do is use some of that brick to repatch in where we can't salvage units from up above. So we are making the window units at the second floor bigger. We're scaling them slightly larger because that second floor will be an event space, a place for weddings, for parties, for larger gatherings. So obviously the view is a pretty optimal advantage for that second floor. We've kept with a very traditional, we're using a double hung window unit, but it's got that same kind of stacked 3 pattern in the muttons on the upper sashes, which will match towards Water Street. And then we've just extended that with a single simple open sash below. So as we come back with that new brick installation, will match the pattern of the install that's there and the very intricate patterning that is being removed. Fortunately, to the Water Street side, that brick's all in really good shape. So on that elevation, we'll be replacing the windows somewhat in kind. They'll obviously be a modern clad unit, but they're going to stay with that same size and that same window articulation. And then the first floor will come back with a new storefront system. Mentioned along the deck, obviously it's a very active piece. It starts off flush at Water Street and extends at a flat elevation that matches the first floor. So you can see from the view in the upper right-hand corner that there's not anything that really obstructs your view from Water Street out towards either Jackson Street Pier or towards Shoreline. And that'll have a very simple cable rail that extends around it to maintain a view. We did keep some landscaping in that corner. You know, there's a very nice tree, which we tried to ghost out in the rendering, but that tree will remain, as will a little bit of landscaping, so we can keep a nice soft buffer at that corner. Rooftop deck, which you can gently see from the Water Street elevation. We did step that back from the edge of the roof. There's a parapet that extends around the top of this building and extends up about 4.5 feet as it stands. So to build that rooftop deck, we're doing a little bit of structural gymnastics. We have to build a steel frame to support that. The existing building wasn't designed for those kinds of loads. So we're keeping that as low a profile as we can, but with the steel structure and with all the structure that goes with that, that will inevitably be a little bit taller than the parapet that's there. So we've stepped back that rooftop deck from the parapet wall a good 30 inches so that we can, as you look up at the building, that deck and the view of it is kept as minimal as possible. Where our stair extends up to the rooftop, you can see from the upper left-hand rendering, that stair, we minimized the height of it as much as we could. So we kept following the rake of the stair. You'll just see about 4 feet of that wall is going to extend up above the brick. And as we did with the last application, we changed the material from brick to siding so that it can just sort of disappear into the wall adjacent and that we don't obstruct, don't sort of implicate the view of that darker brick below. Facing out towards Shoreline, we're adding some window openings that face into the dining room on the first floor and into the event space on the second floor. And the rear of the building that's currently missing, what you see on the application today is really just a blank facade. But along the lines of what the ownership team has for this building, they have some plans for that second and third floor area, and what they'd like to do is they'd like to show you that developed at a later date. That will either be some larger openings that might open up to a separate establishment up there, or it'll have some simpler window units. So what we're looking for tonight is really just a very simple facade, something that's it's sided right now, so it's meant to just sort of disappear into the background, but we would definitely maintain the stone base that is still intact. So I know I threw a lot at you, but that's the presentation at a higher level.
So Jeff, am I right? The shoreline side of the rooftop will be glass panels?
That's correct. We want to keep that open and visible towards the water, and then all the other sides will be a cable rail system.
Questions from members?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
A couple things. I might have missed, but one was the AZAC on the front. The windows underneath that vinyl siding are just a flat top window, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I just thought I didn't know what the AZAC was filling in. I just wanted to make sure. I really don't like those rounded top windows filled in with an AZAC. Doesn't look that great down there. And then
the AZAC that we're using on the front of that is really only at the first floor where the garage door was.
Okay. And the other question I had is the shoreline drive under the deck. What is the material that hides the skirt for the deck?
That material there.
Yeah.
The intent with that is that'll be the same Trex material that's on the deck above.
Like a plank.
It'll be a plank, yeah. So we'll have a Trex material on the horizontal surface of the deck, and we'll use that same material to clad and skirt around the perimeter of the deck.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Sorry, it's Alan. Just to let you know, I won't be voting on this matter. I'm recusing myself.
Okay, thank you, Alan.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this question's for Tom. I would assume the awning and signs that are in their picture, those will be at a later date as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and speaking to signage as well, we would like to bring that back to you at a later date. I mean, we have kind of three placeholders right now. We have two projecting signs, one at the one that sort of faces out to shoreline. We have one along Water Street, and then we have the awning that goes over the center of the building. But we would like to bring all that back sort of as a comprehensive signage package to you.
Others?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I forgot one other question. I just so we don't end up with another doghouse down the road here, that door up towards Water Street leads to an elevator or stairwell, I assume?
It does, but as you're entering through those doors, can you roll to the plans? I think there's a plan in here, Tom, isn't there? Go back 2 more pages. So on the left hand side there, you see you enter into a lobby, and that'll also be the entrance into the restaurant. The elevator will be to your left, stair going up is straight ahead. Then you enter into the restaurant to the right.
Thank you.
And then the second stair you can see straight ahead is at the back of the building, and that extends all the way up to the rooftop. So both of these stairs go up all the way to the roof.
Other questions? Comments? Are we ready for a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the design for the certificate of appropriateness as presented.
Thank you. Do
Second.
we have a second?
Second, yes.
Thank you, Mike.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Berkey?
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yes.
Commissioner Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Griffiths?
Abstain.
Mr. Galea?
Yes.
Mr. Nagel?
Yes.
Mr. Whaley?
Yes.
Thank you, gentlemen. Good luck, Jim. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Next, we have 202 Columbus Avenue. Take it away, Tom.
Jamie Bardis.
Is now exiting.
Mike Watson. Roberta Watson.
Is now exiting.
Thank you, Mr. Horstman. Mr. Chairman, I did include in this application a bit of the history because I kind of fell in love with the story. And as much as we cherish, what was built in the past, and there's discovery on how it was built and who was Walter Stone, and then after he passed, isn't it a great story that his spouse picked up the project and built what we have today? But the further I really dove into what is on record, it became the story of not just how the building was built, but how it survived, and in many ways how it has failed. And so what that brings us to today is many months of consulting with the city on this project, and I'm acting as agent for the owner. And I've had some experience with the city and working on projects, so I don't know if I'll be the go-between, but I'm here to try to make sure that what's put forward in front of the city is something that we can all be proud of. The business owner, as you know, has worked very hard to establish the business of Small City Tap House, but has little experience in development. So that's where we sit today. There are just 3 points I would like to add as the highlights in this, and that is, Tom, if you've got the screen, maybe just cut to slide 15, which gets into the scope of work. Primarily, again, we're destined to save this building. Currently, there's some failure due to a lot of water penetration, deterioration on the far east wall, which is back in the alley. There's roofing that is being redone on the building. I don't think it's seen a new roof in 30, 35 years. Gutters have failed, water has penetrated, bricks have spalled, and so we do have a mess to clean up. That work is current. That work is underway and is under contract. So that's not part of this application, which is focused on street-facing facades. So if and I think everyone knows the building. It's been boarded up since it's been Cabana Jack's, and prior to that, Bourbon Street. I don't know when that happened, but when Jupiter Building, when Kresge turned the store into the Jupiter Building, that's when we first noticed in photographs that the building had been painted. So windows, masonry, all of those areas are of focus for us as we restore the building. On the masonry front, when it was painted, we think it was in the 1965, 1970 era. That is about a 75 to 80 year shelf life for the masonry and the mortar. So we're not sure if it was really the corporate colors they chose to paint over the brick as a preference for the corporation, or if it was failing, getting water penetration, and they were really trying to seal and save the building. When we peel back what is already spalling off the building, the brick is chalky. The joints are very tight on this building for whatever reason. I did some studies in this regard, and our conclusion is that we should clean up and repaint the structure. So that is part of our proposal. The windows, we did some research there, and by looking into the city's files of other building window types, we're matching what was put in the Columbus lofts from the historic pictures. That is a 1/1. There are some sash windows up in the upper story, 2 stories, which are vacant. Not many, and those were divided light, so we're not sure when those were put in, but they weren't the original, so we'll go back to matching the original. We intend to match all the shapes of the radius tops, the angular pieces, and so the windows and the masonry is the lion's share of the project. But anything that had been painted previously, such as the cornice, will be restored. There are missing pieces of the cornice. When you look at this architecturally, I think its merits are that it is of a high Victorian style, as noted in the National Register. The cornice is significant. Its form, its shape, its pattern of ABA across the front is dominant. The side elevation, it's not so terrific, but I think with new windows, a new coat of paint, retaining the stairwell just for its historic character, and cleaning up some areas such as the kitchen door, the covering that's been added on to the building, probably not seen by this committee, and the alleyway that we can start to unify the building, pull it back together, and with some signage and awning, bring it back to the class that it should be within the city of Sandusky. So we intend to save the building. That's our methodology for doing it. We have a lot of material studies still to do. I have retained professional masonry restoration groups to take a look at this, and also the painting companies on how they would carefully either strip or clean and paint the building structure. And we have pricing for all of that. So the third message here is really, we just want to join the chorus and join the choir here. Many of the buildings in town have been restored. There's the Columbus Avenue project by the city that's moving forward. The owner is excited about bringing the building back, not so excited about the bricks falling off the building and the roof having to be replaced, but he understands that is his responsibility and duty. And the other thing that I just might mention, it's not in the proposal and it's nothing formal, but the upper 2 stories that are vacant would find some future use, I think, to the owner, and that could be in the form of apartments. The other thing that appears absent in the presentation is the adjacent building, the 220 building that was formerly Woolworth, that burned down in the 60s and had been replaced by the 2-story structure. And as I understand, it's maybe best not to do anything to adorn the building to try to unify the two, but I would think that a unifying element could be in signage, in awnings, in those type of accoutrements to bring this together. I had spent some time at Small City Tap House, mostly because I feel I'm deeply indebted to Ka. When he said he wanted to build a restaurant downtown in Sandusky, I said, great. When he said he's going to put 60 beers on tap, I told him he was crazy, and I have apologized to him every time I see him since then. But when you're in the facility, there's always some confusion on how to enter. There's a door that's for ADA access. There's a a door that connects the two brewery and the restaurant. There's a door now that leads directly into the brewery. So I think with either signage that we can refine, or I would call it more of a graphic standard for the building as a wayfinding means, I think that's something also absent from the application, but I think it's necessary to pull this building back together commercially. Many stories to tell here, but I think I'll stop there for the sake of time and turn it back over, Mr. Chairman, to you and the commission.
Thank you, Rob. I'm sure I speak on behalf of the commission. This is an exciting project. I just want to take a moment to thank you, Rob, for the presentation. The application packet was very easy to follow, and it's quite evident of your reverence and respect for the historic architecture associated with this building. This is exactly what we want to see happen with some of these grand old ladies downtown. And I appreciate the work that you've put in to try to explain to us the intentions of this project. With that, I'll open it up for questions from members.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yes. I think it's great as well. Thank you, Mr. Decker and Ka, obviously. I just have, you mentioned that the painting contractors are going to come in and maybe peel or do whatever they do, and not being a painting contractor, are we, or maybe this is for Mr. Horstman, or is there somebody in the city that can assure the building owner that we are not covering up something that needs to be tuck pointed down the road? I mean, is there another step in the line once we peel paint back? And they say we're just we're going to make the situation worse. Is there anything in a line like that, or is Mr. Decker pretty confident that the painting is the best course and it won't ruin the mortar or moisture in the brick or whatever?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, we're certainly open for that dialogue with the city, and that I would think it would fall under permitting. Now, the contractors I've spoken with have said yes, given the data you're giving me just historically, it's lead-based paint, and just looking at it and how it's been spalling with the water penetration. You would think it's a hard-fired brick and it's a good surface and you could blast away, but we know that's not going to happen. It would be a scrub and soft spray, if you will, no greater than 50 psi to clean it up. All contaminant, all elements would be captured. But to answer your question, until we really start to peel back the skin a little bit more and understand, we did include a provision for tuck pointing as an allocation, that if we had to tuck point the whole building, it would be, a very, very steep price, but they felt that it could be up to 20-30% of the building might require that. There's a lot of windows here, and what's above those is limestone, and the cornice is large. So when we're really talking about the surface area of the masonry, we're not really concerned from a budget standpoint. So I'm trying to answer your question by saying I think there will be a step when we peel back the mask, we can see what we're dealing with, and then we need to be assured ourselves for sure that we're really sealing the building properly, which is studied and which is in their proposal. But then I think that might fall into the permitting process as well with Mr. Tom to take a look over his shoulder.
So in other words, that process will evolve as you go along, correct, Rob?
It will. I think it will be an iterative process, not knowing fully what we're going to discover.
Other members, questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just a pretty simple question. Are some of the cornice work in that, is that going to be replicated up there on pieces that are missing?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think that's something that we don't have full missing parts. We have the twin of what's paired there. And it's a metal cornice, and I think we can find the right craftsman to be able to replicate that, and it's our full intent to do so.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Others? If not, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, Talon, I move that we accept the certificate of appropriateness in this case.
Thank you, Alan. Second?
Second.
Who's the winner?
I'll second, I guess.
Okay, Mike. Any other discussion? Roll call.
Dr. Berkey,
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Griffiths,
Yes.
Mr. Galea,
Yes.
Mr. Nagel,
Yes.
Mr. Whaley,
Yes.
Thanks, Rob. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank
Onward.
you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, our last applicant is 333 West Market Street. Mr. Horsman. Whalen.
Hello, my name's Connor Whalen. I'm here with Tony Lamberios, one of the other owners of the building. I guess I want to first say that there is no lack of respect or reverence for restoring historic buildings in downtown Sandusky and what this commission does. I was a member of the commission, the Landmark Commission, for a short period of time, which I suppose would give me no real good excuse for building without prior authorization from this board. I will tell you in all truth, I was not trying to skirt the process here. The rooftop structure, honestly, is just meant to go over top of the stairwell. It's built currently, and it's there and was part of this phase because at the south end of where that structure is, there was an atrium that went through the roof on the building. We need to get the roof shored up. It's leaking still currently because we've been waiting to get this finished to make sure that we were approved. But to get that done, to get the roof done, we needed to get this structure up there so that we can roof around it. So I guess I just want to make sure that you realize I was not intending to skirt the process. I obviously knew that we would need to come for the facade when it was time to have that approved. It did not occur to me that the rooftop would be. That said, we're here. That is a drawing of the building. The picture on page 77 of the packet shows a picture now that it is built and the rooftop structure is there. And that picture is taken from across the street on the other side of Market Street. So you can see that you can't see it from the street in front of the building. I guess while we're here, I'm hoping we can get a certificate of appropriateness for that structure. We want to do some aluminum windows in that structure. I sent Tom a picture of those windows earlier today. And as part of phase one, we're going to need to get new windows in the side and rear. And if you look at the back, while we could rent out units without the back decks, we want to get those new doorways added back there. The intention would be to do windows that match the front of the building all the way around. And the new doors would likely be aluminum with a black aluminum. We're going to stick with tan that's on the front and black as the primary two colors. If you look at the awning on the front of the building, we've kind of had discussions on when that comes to pass. Do we want to have a black awning with copper letters or a copper awning with black letters? But those are the three colors we're thinking is the tan that's there, black, and then a copper accent. I guess I would say I'm open to questions on whatever else you guys would like to know.
Okay, thank you. If my colleagues on the commission would indulge me for a few minutes, I'd like to bring some clarification to several issues connected to this application and then express my first opinion. First, the Landmark Commission has a strong record of being pro-development, working with owners and their representatives to strike a balance between fulfilling its duty to protect the rich history of historic buildings and structures with the proposed changes of the property owner. We are pro-business developers and rarely say no to plans submitted to us. We compromise when necessary and negotiate adjustments so that a win-win situation occurs. The applicant has purchased an historic building listed on the National Register of Historic Properties. I'm enthused with the idea of returning the Heminger Saloon to its original purpose, that being a pub on the first floor and a residence for rentals on the upper two floors. The events surrounding this application have been quite concerning and challenging. I have received several phone calls expressing opposition to the rooftop structure already in place. I've also raised important issues with staff regarding the enforcement of city ordinances, safety inspection of the rooftop addition, and the propriety of bringing in an application forward that contains features built without approvals and incomplete information from which to evaluate the proposed changes. So I put an extraordinary amount of time in to ask myself if this proposal is in the right column or the wrong one. I concluded there are two major problems with this application. First, you altered the roof line of the building and constructed a rooftop structure last November/December in violation of two city ordinances that require you to first obtain a certificate of appropriateness from the Landmark Commission, and second, a building permit from the building department for exterior work. That was wrong. We're not in the business of looking the other way nor playing favorites. Keep in mind that many of our residents follow city ordinances when making changes to their properties, and when they don't, the city seeks compliance. Our citizens expect the rules to be applied evenly and equally. Second, you filed an application that was incomplete. All of the scale drawings that were submitted were of changes to the interior of the building, except for the drawing of the rooftop structure that was already partially built. Our commission only deals with exterior changes. The color pictures of the proposed changes to the exterior of the building do not tell us what you are doing. Thus, we are left to draw inferences by comparing the existing historic and architectural features with your proposed pictures. Your opportunity to explain all of your proposed work was on the section of the application that asked for a description. You failed to provide a description and simply listed titles to what you are calling phase 1, 2, and 3. In addition to this, we have no knowledge of the materials being used, so we cannot evaluate the application on the basis of the standards for historic properties. Applicants for certificates come to our meetings with well prepared in terms of documentation and supplied visuals, drawings, descriptions of materials, repair work specifics, color schemes, and well-defined narratives, outlines, and diagrams. Your application did not provide that information, and that too was wrong. Your application certainly does not tell us what you are doing, so we can judge it based upon merit. It is far too vague and open for interpretation. As for the staff recommendations regarding this application, I would like to point out the following. Staff supports the rehabilitation of this historic building. The commission supports rehabilitation to historic buildings as well, as long as they conform to the standards. Unfortunately, we don't know what the rehabilitations include because the applicant failed to provide this information. Staff supported the proposed additions to the building on the condition the applicant provide more detailed information on the materials and any cut sheets of windows, doors, or awnings that are to be added. And staff goes on to state they are willing to work with the applicant to ensure that based on feedback from the commission, the project is in line with historic rehabilitation standards. But again, the applicant failed to provide this information for this meeting so that commission members could evaluate it and give feedback. I am not comfortable with having all of this detail provided verbally because it makes accountability of any plan going forward open to a great deal of interpretation. And I want to remind staff that the Landmark Commission does not delegate authority to staff to make judgment calls on the conformity to standards. That is our job as commission members. And we have only allowed delegation of decision-making in a limited fashion regarding signage. We simply cannot provide an applicant as well as staff to make decisions on compliance to standards on their own. We retain that right as defined in city ordinances. Now, having stated all that, I will not be voting to approve this application, not because the city ordinances were violated. That is a separate issue for city management to address. I will be voting no because this proposal fails to show merit in following the standards. We have been given a specific charge by our city commissioners, and we are obligated to fulfill that in accordance to the process and standards in place. I will be more specific in addressing how this applicant fails to meet those standards. A copy of the interior standards was attached to this application, and I will refer to these specifically. Item 1, a property shall be used for its historic purpose or be placed in a new use that requires minimal change to defining characteristics of the building and its site and environment. Looking at the drawings and pictures you have submitted, the changes are far from minimal and in fact are numerous. Those changes include 1, the addition of a rooftop structure on a 3-story building. 2, the addition of a deck, fencing, and support columns on an altered flat roof. 3, the alteration of the original hip roof line to one that establishes a flat roof accommodation for the proposed building and deck. 4, elimination of the framed stone surrounds that sit above each double-hung window on the facade. 5, changes to the facade windows from single pane to 6 pane. 6, changes to the facade fascia and roof line with the elimination of wood corbels and carved vertical supports. 7, replacement of facade masonry features above, below, and adjacent to the 2nd and 3rd floor windows. 8, replacement of the street level single door entrance to a double door entrance. 9, replacement of street level windows with combination windows and doors. 10, addition of street level fencing on either side of the main entrance and attached to the facade. 11, addition of a canopy to the facade at street level. 12, replacement of the existing brick finish of the facade with undefined facing. 13, addition of double doors cut into the center of the 2nd and 3rd floors of the north side of the building. 14, the addition of balconies on the 2nd and 3rd floor of the north side of the building. 15, the alteration of windows on the east side of the building to 8-pane windows. And 16, multiple changes to the colors and textures of the building. Standard 2, the historic character of a property shall be retained and preserved. The removal of historic materials or alteration of features and spaces that characterize a property shall be avoided. The Heminger Saloon was built between 1884 and 1886 and is included in the National Registry of Historic Places. Its architectural features are representative of high Victorian style, always executed in brick or stone. High Victorian buildings are distinguished by its use of polychrome bands of decorative masonry, stone quins, pressed brick, terracotta panels were commonly used, and windows and doors were accented with brick or stone trim, often in contrasting colors. Your plan alters the characteristic features of this historic building from high Victorian to one that is contemporary, using straight lines, window replacements uncharacteristic of the time area, and street level doors and fencing that detract from the original style of the facade. Your plan uses undefined substitute materials that do not convey the appearance of the historic building as stated in the standards. Standard 3, each property shall be recognized as a physical record of its time, place, and use. Changes that create a false sense of historical development, such as adding conjectural features or architectural elements from other buildings, shall not be undertaken. Your plan produces conjectural features to the street level facade that give a false sense of history via multiple entrances and fencing that are not related to nor compatible with the original design of the Victorian architecture. Standard 5, distinctive features, finishes, and construction techniques or examples of craftsmanship that characterize a property shall be preserved. One of the most compelling and distinctive features of the Heminger Saloon is the hip roof, which is outlined on the facade by significant craftsmanship in wood corbels and fascia that announce the Victorian style of the building. The proposed rooftop deck fails to preserve this style by altering the roof line and focusing one's eyes on a building and deck that overwhelms the presentation of the building from street level and imposes on the skyline from several blocks away in multiple directions. The present structure constructed on the roof can easily be seen from as far away as the Jackson Street Pier. The only time it is hidden from view is from the sidewalk directly in front of the building. In addition, many of the features that are examples of the craftsmanship from the Victorian era disappear on the color pictures that you provided. Standard 6, deteriorated historic features shall be repaired rather than replaced. Where severity of deterioration requires replacement of a distinctive feature, the new feature shall match the old in design, color, texture, and other visual qualities, and where possible, materials. The proposed window replacements fail to preserve their distinctive single pane, double hung frames crowned with decorative masonry. There is no mention in this plan to repair brick mortar, stone surrounds, wood corbels, and fascia and trim, as well as the pilasters overhanging on the facade. Item 9, new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historical integrity of the property and its environment. The addition of the flat roof, rooftop structure, decking, and railing failed to meet this standard. The alteration of the roof line to accommodate an enclosed structure and deck are not compatible with the size and the scale of the building. The rooftop structure overwhelms the historical presentation of the building and infringes upon the historic integrity of the Victorian architecture that enabled it to be placed on the National Registry. In my opinion, the proposed rooftop structure and deck are the most objectionable part of this application. The remaining changes are undefined and far too ambiguous to evaluate from the lack of information provided in the application. In other words, in my opinion, this plan is a complete do-over. The rooftop plan is not compatible with the building, and the remaining changes in additions to the exterior are not defined. Without proper documentation, all of these changes are left to a very wide swath of interpretation. Tom, would you please bring up the slides that I provided you that show different photographic shots of this building with the rooftop structure in place? And that, of course, is a close street view. Next, please. Okay, we're moving through them. Can we back up and go through those one at a time? And keep going back. As members can see, that's from the Jackson Street Pier. Next, please. That's far down the street. You can still see that structure. Keep going, please. That again is from the Jackson Street Pier. Tom, can we there's a couple of across the street pictures, if you can find those. Okay, so the picture on the left is the one that we've seen submitted. The one on the right truly shows from the street the amount of that structure that's sticking up. And the point that I'm making is, if you look at the fascia, you looked at the center of the top of the building, that architecture is a major feature of the building that defines the hip roof that sits behind it. This plan is to change a good portion of that roof line to a flat roof. And as the result of doing that, if we can go to a close-up view of how that was done, Tom, there's a picture. There it is. Let's go back one. Notice this is what has to take place in order to create a flat roof. This, because you are trying to change a hip roof to a flat roof, which is a big no in the standards, Notice the height that you have to reach on the back side of that structure in order to accommodate it. I now open the floor to other commission members who wish to convey their thoughts on this application.
May I ask one quick question?
Well,
before we go forward, or
not yet.
okay.
Commission members to respond.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I think the summary you gave is exactly on point. In my opinion, this is a case of what not to do and what we're trying to dissuade from happening. I hope that a solution can be reached to clarify the scope of this work and to get a project that everybody can feel comfortable with. Me personally, I do not. This is unfortunate.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, I think you laid that out very well, and I appreciate that. I have the same sentiments, but I certainly understand the desire to get a project moving. I've been there before, so I really hope that that this gets adjusted as it needs to, and we can move forward, because I would like to have a beer in the old Heminger Saloon someday. But I think we just need to work with these folks, and I think city staff can do the same to help guide them in the proper direction to make sure we maintain the integrity of this building.
Thank you. Others?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have a question for Mr. Horstman first. The audio on what was his mention about 4 floors versus 3 floors? Thank you, Mr. Horstman. With that, I understand. I have to preface my statement with, I consider myself friends with Mr. Whalen, and I think he bought a grand building, and he's going to make money on that building someday. And I admire his ambition, but I don't admire his taste. I have received more phone calls and more passion about this structure going on in this building than I have at any time as a city commissioner. And personally, in person, I have not seen it. I just see the photos, and I have to admit, I started laughing. Like, I think you gotta like watch some HD TV or something, man. But now I understand why everybody was calling me. And from our first couple, I'm still struggling with approving the Shores and Island one with that little thumb thing sticking up there. I don't like that at all, but the overall project, we could see what the end run was. So I think if you could put something together and take from the meeting that you sat in today with the setbacks, and it sounds like to me like the building department is going to require 2 non-combustible stairwells going to the roof. So you're going to have 2 dog houses up there because they're not going to be able to be, they're going to have to be separated with firewalls. So I think that engineering and architecture is going to have to get involved, and you may have to bring this back. So I agree with everybody else. I hope that, and I hope you do well with this building, and I think you will, but bottom line is I understand now why everybody was calling me. Thank you.
Others?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'm going to echo a little bit of what the other members have stated. I would feel a lot more comfortable with some specifics on as far as the exterior drawings, materials, and the like. So I would not support something that doesn't clearly define those, let alone meet the standards.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, it's Alan.
Yes.
First of all, like Commissioner Meinzer, consider myself a friend of Mr. Whalen's, and I appreciate his ambition and certainly his desire to see a building that has been underutilized in our community, as if is of historic note, brought back into use. Unfortunately, I share the concerns of others, particularly with the rooftop bar and the lack of detail on the application. And I would just, if you like, encourage Mr. Whalen to revisit some of the detail in his application and encourage him to continue pursuing this, regardless of the outcome here.
Thank you. Others?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I think I may be the last one. I don't. I don't want to go too much into the merits of the work, as I think that's been addressed by the previous comments, including your own. Except my is more of a process issue, and I guess directed as much to perhaps staff, the city commission, or anyone else, is that frequently we're put in a position, as I think Mr. Whalen sort of even acknowledged, and I believe him to be sincere with his respect for what we're doing here. I've interacted with him while he was on this commission, while we were on the planning commission together. I absolutely believe that he meant no intent to hear his partners to skirt any rule or to do that. And I think oftentimes we are confronted with work that's been done in an honest, good faith attempt to stabilize the structure or something to that effect. And that seems to be the providence of this. I guess my concern is by the time you get your ideas together, we meet on a pretty regular basis. I think it would have been probably pretty easy to come to us and not lose a lot of time in your schedule to maybe just address the roof as an independent, discrete, certificate before we get into kind of a more comprehensive rebuild. That said, I think hopefully we can continue to work with either staff or the city commission on making sure that we're not in a position where the onus is on us as a commission to essentially cure a non-compliance with the ordinance or to kind of give a post hoc forgiveness for someone not seeking a certificate of appropriateness. I mean, I think there's a whole reason why the ordinance exists to begin with, and why we have something called a certificate of appropriateness. And maybe it would be proper in some context to do that post hoc, but I think that we're often put in an uncomfortable position where there's been a capital expenditure. To deny it a certificate might require an applicant to essentially eat that cost and engage in some removal of what was done. And it's just not a great position for us as folks on this commission to be in, because we're here more or less in a volunteer capacity. As you pointed out, we all want to see restoration of these and preservation of these structures. I mean, I think everybody here wants to see that, and I think we're all genuinely enthusiastic that we have 3 partners who are local who want to invest in this structure. So I think that's all, very much in our minds. But then if we get presented with some work that's been completed that just simply we would not approve had it come to us ahead of time, and I'm not, necessarily stating that that's my vote, but I think we would have questions based on some of the comments I've heard. So we're often put in this position where, people are coming to us and that, and I think we're quickly getting to the point where, if people don't know by now, that this is kind of what we do and who we are, and we're, if the city needs to start making that part of other permitting processes, or how we get that word out, whatever, I just think staff, our executive administration, and our city commission need to be aware that this has just been, since my time on the Landmark Commission, an ongoing thing. Probably one out of every 2 or 3 meetings, this seems to come up in some way or another, and it's just it just really makes our job difficult, and puts us into a position where I don't think we intend ourselves to be code enforcement or anything like that, but we find ourselves in that position. So that's just my feelings, and this is not simply to single out this application, because it's happened numerous times before, but I just think this is a good example of why that can be a problem for us.
Yes, I concur with you, Joe, and I want you to reiterate some of those comments, as well as other members. When we get to new business, we've kind of tossed around the idea that there's a need to address that as well as other related issues. And so let's make sure we talk a little bit more about that before we leave this evening. I want to bring us back to Connor had a question. Connor, take it away.
Yeah, I guess your prepared statement was definitely more a longer list than I was anticipating. I guess I first want to say I turned in my architectural drawings to the city in October. So I did have my plans turned in, and I didn't have the approval. And so I understand that that is my responsibility there. I just want to state that I did have those turned in October. And the next I heard about it was a phone call from Whoopser, because he was getting blown up by others calling about this.
Okay, Connor,
the question that I was going to ask was to Tom or staff: is this either being recorded, or do we have some detailed notes on the statement that was first made that kind of addressed every standard? I think that I certainly am not expecting this to get passed in any sort of way this evening, hearing all of the members' comments. So I want to be much more prepared for the next time I come in front of this group. And so that list, I would like to be able to read through that in more detail before the next meeting, so that I can prepare some things. I certainly intended to talk about the materials being used, and I get with the length of that list that verbal would not be okay. I thought that we might be talking about a thing or two. And to be honest with you, I'm still kind of scratching my head on how this rooftop structure does not comply, because from my understanding, the compliance is the view from the street. And that picture that I submitted that is on 77 was from last week. That is from across the street. The one where you can see it, the picture that you submitted, is from well into the Sandusky Register parking lot. So I'm scratching my head on that, but I think that it's kind of beside the point at this, after hearing everybody speak. I don't think that it's in anybody's best interest for us to kind of start going through line by line tonight. I need to be more prepared for when we do that.
Okay, Connor, let me jump in here. First, the architectural drawings, do you understand that the majority of those drawings you submitted don't fall within our scope? Our limitation is the exterior of the building.
Yes, I do understand that. Actually, the CAD drawings that are the exterior are more done by Tony Lamberios, who's sitting next to me. Okay. And they probably don't. We were a little disappointed in the way that the colors came through. And we were hoping we could explain some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But
Connor,
again,
got the floor, Connor. You let me talk here, please?
Yep.
Okay, so we're not going to abandon you. We've got some options here. But before we get there, I want you to fully understand the reason I had to go through all of that long list is because you didn't provide any of that information. Generalized color pictures tell us virtually nothing. We need to know the specifics, but we're not going to abandon you. Based upon, how this commission makes a decision, and we'll be doing that shortly here, we're going to also have a short discussion after that so you feel you haven't been abandoned. I can provide you with a copy of all of the standards that I went through, but I also will point out to you, as well as other members would do this, not every single one of those standards is in stone. I went to those standards to get you to understand the overwhelming volume of changes that you were proposing to a historic building that was placed on the register because of its architecture. And that is what we're trying to preserve, okay? So with that, I need a motion on this application.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can I make one more statement?
Yes.
I'd like to address, I guess, I'd like to just say one thing. Mr. Gallia brought up commission and the departments working together. We've already started talking. Mr. Holliday is relatively new, and he's getting thrown into the middle of a lot of this. And I want to bring this up before Mr. Whalen leaves, because I think we're going to talk in new business, because if I think the building department probably failed on this, because if everybody in the city saw this, the building department saw this. So I think that that's where the city has let Mr. Whalen down. The moment they saw some construction coming on, they should have probably said, time out, you better go through this process. This is what you need to do in order to not waste a lot of money. And I just feel like we kind of let him down and his partners down as a city, and we really need to address this moving forward with everyone so they don't get into this stumbling block again. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, it's Alan. Just a question on process here. Is it appropriate, and I know you're looking for a motion, is it appropriate at this time to determine whether or not the applicant wishes to withdraw his application? Sorry, that might be one for the lawyers. Is he back?
Mr. Meinzer, I was cut out for a minute while you were speaking there, so I appreciate the words, but I didn't hear them all. Alan, I did hear your suggestion, and that would seem to make sense to me, but I'll wait to hear what everybody else thinks on the matter.
Okay.
All right.
Just without being recognized, Alan, I was about to suggest maybe, this would somehow be, tabled or something along those lines. I guess the only concern for me personally is we still have some work that's been done without a certificate of appropriateness. So I don't know what kind of limbo that leaves Mr. Whalen in. And I appreciate what Mr. Meinzer had to say about my comments. Hopefully I didn't mean to necessarily suggest that city commission hasn't, I tend to agree it's been more of a problem with the building department. And so I'm glad that, I think Mr. Meinzer and I are of one mind on that, as the city, and we can all work better at this. And, when the city building department's not, maybe engaging with an applicant in a timely manner, and I have heard that sometimes too, it puts the applicants in a very awkward spot as well. So, that's probably got to be a priority for the staff.
Okay. I think in order for us to move on and to be able to talk about next steps, we first need a motion to vote on the application.
Mr. Chairman, so
Yeah.
moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I want to clarify that when we do the roll call vote, if you are stating yes, the affirmative, you are approving the application as presented. If you're voting no, you're saying no to the application as presented. Roll call, please.
Dr. Berkey,
No.
Mr. Lawrence,
No.
Commissioner Meinzer,
No.
Mr. Griffiths,
No.
Mr. Galea,
No.
Mr. Nagel,
No.
Mr. Whaley.
No.
Okay, so this leaves, let's talk to Connor here. This leaves you with two options, Connor. The first is that you will be notified in writing of our decision that you just heard. You can appeal it to the city commissioners within a 10-day period. I would propose that we get some commission members to, with the staff, work with you on first a good explanation of what we mean by the standards, looking at what ideas you have for your building, how we could work through some of those and find some opportunities for compromise. I will say this, that the most difficult part of your application that I just don't see reoccurring is the rooftop structure. You're trying to take a hip roof and make it a flat roof, and that drives the height of that structure so high that is why I got complaints, Commissioner Meisner got complaints. Looks like I'm losing the meeting.
Dr. Berkey, I am here. I'll let you know in case things get lost here in the next few seconds. I do plan to work with staff and do a much better job detailing the application, and I'm hoping to be able to do that for next month. So I plan to get on that here really soon in the next couple of days, getting down there, working on a much more detailed plan. And I suppose then we'll talk again at the next meeting, and if not in between.
Mr. Chairman, we did hear you. We don't see you. No, we lost him completely.
Mike, did you hear what I said?
Yeah, I did, Connor. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be down. I'll be working on something, and I'll plan to get a more detailed drawing in for the next meeting.
That sounds good. I don't know who the vice chair is, but do we have one?
It's me, and yes, I was cut off again there with the internet or connection issue. So
yeah, so John, did you hear me?
I heard some of it on YouTube. My assistant was playing it for me.
So I'm gonna just get a much more detailed drawing together, and kind of probably meet with some of you guys individually to make sure that I am providing the detail that you guys want. And then I hope to be on again next month. And
yeah, that
hopefully we'll be able to get something figured out.
Oh yeah, definitely.
All right, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
Connor,
you.
I was just gonna, encourage you to kind of, I think we're all, interested in meeting with you individually or maybe a couple at a time to work through a lot of these issues. I think we all want you to be successful, and we know you are dedicated. So we're all, I think, willing to, give up some time to do that. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Sure, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely, you're welcome.
Yeah, Connor. Brandy has my phone number too, if you need it.
Is it over me?
This chairman, I just checked you into the meeting. Do you have audio? Do you have the agenda in front of you, Mr. Lawrence? Maybe we can move forward to.
John.
Is now joining.
John Lawrence is back.
I think we seem to have lost multiple groups of people. Tom, is that correct? Okay. Looking at the agenda, we've got report from staff and new business left. Do you want to go ahead and do the staff report, or?
Any new business?
Yeah, we should move on new business. Okay.
I think Dr. Berkey had some issues he wanted to bring up in new business, but if he's not here, it's probably moot at that point.
Well, I have had.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. Did you want to go ahead?
Is that Ryan? Who I don't know.
This is Joe speaking.
Okay. I was just going to say that I did have a couple discussions with Dr. Berkey over the past couple weeks, and I know some of his concerns, and we've talked with Mr. Holliday and Mr.
Is now joining.
And I'm sure that he's been in conference with Mr. Nagel maybe and some of the others. Is that correct? With some of his concerns, yeah. So I think what and we've relayed this to Mr. Holliday that we'd really like to get a better process, a better flow for the people that are trying to improve the city and the downtown. And I don't know exactly how organizationally we structure it, but there has to be a process for developers and for actually just for citizens to go through, like, this is step by step. This is first. And the one thing we did discuss is maybe, and this just adds more work to less staff, but when there is a land transfer, that is the moment that triggers that somebody's interested in a property. And then on that land transfer, it's a historical building. The city may be the one that reaches out first and says, look, we see you bought this building and we want to help you restore it. And this is the process we need to go through. You got to submit the landmark, you have to submit the planning, you have to submit the building to whatever, so that they're not left like Mr. Whalen was just now. Because I swear, when I saw that picture, I started laughing. I mean, I couldn't help it because I've had so many phone calls and so much passion about that building from the folks in town. And I personally never saw the structure, so I didn't know what they were talking about. I thought it was just going to be a little doghouse up on the roof. So I can see now, they can see that from a long way away from everywhere. So, and there's one more thing.
Go ahead.
And there's one more thing that I want to mention. These because of the elevation change from Water Street to Shoreline Drive, the one thing that kind of bugs me is now as these deck things going, I feel like walking down Shoreline Drive, looking at a Tyvek skirt or looking at these type of things, it just seems like kind of cheesy. I don't know if there's something that some regulations or some standards or something that we can do from the Shoreline Drive. We put a lot of money into Shoreline Drive. It's a beautiful drive. But if you're driving down there and at window height in your vehicle or walking height, walking by and looking at, AZEK or Tyvek or lattice work or, places where the varmints live, it just seems like maybe we could tighten that up a little bit. That's just a couple of thoughts I had. But I would refer to a couple others like Mr. Nagel or Mr. Griffin, some of the people that are more in tune with historical things than I am. I got appointed just because I'm a commissioner. I've owned some old homes, and I actually belonged to the old house guild at one point in my early life, but I'm really not up to date as everyone else is on this commission. And our duty is, being appointed to this, is to uphold the whatever it is that we're upholding, the historical stuff. And Mr. Nagel could probably speak to that better.
This is Tim. I'm back in the meeting. I missed a lot of your discussion. Is Ryan's? Go ahead. Is Connor still in the meeting?
No, I think he left.
Okay. What I was trying to state to him was, I think that, and I don't know how he left the meeting, if he stated what his intentions are, but I think regardless of what happened, we need to reach out to him, and I think needs to include some of us on the commission working with Tom and with Connor to make sure that we're looking at a new application that addresses those standards but gets some of the things done that he wants to do. He had a lot of things, and of course the color drawings didn't tell us what he was really intending on doing. I really want to know exactly what he's doing to the facade of that building. That's the most important part in terms of the preservation, but the pictures really didn't reveal that, and unfortunately he didn't do any kind of a description that would have given us that information. So I think in terms of a new application, he's got to replicate what our other applicants do, and that is give us a lot more information so we know exactly what he's doing. Without that, there's no way we can hold any applicant accountable when they move forward with the project. I love his idea. I love the idea of turning the saloon back to kind of the way it was, but maybe it would be an opportunity if some of us sat down with him. I volunteer to do that. If I can get another volunteer, maybe with somebody with a background that can speak to him a little bit about his business plan. And I think there's way too much emphasis on what the exterior of the building looks like, because his ground floor business is a bar, and I don't think that changing the architecture of the outside is going to be the drawing card for his bar. It's actually what happens on the inside. And so I would be willing to work with him. I've got the time to do that. If there's anybody else interested, speak up, or let Tom know or let me know. But I think Connor's got a lot of time here waiting, and unfortunately that was not the fault of the Landmark Commission. It was the way this was and was not approached that stalled it. John knows we spent a lot of time trying to work through some of this stuff, and as Joe and Mike and others have stated, we've got some real issues that we need to address in terms of getting to these applicants much earlier in the process so they know the expectations.
Mr. Chairman, just for you in your absence, Connor did express that he wanted to work with staff and the commission and would be bringing another application back as soon as possible. His intention is to bring it back at our next meeting.
Okay. And is anybody else interested in working with us on that? If not, we'll proceed.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm available if need be by Teams or site visit or whatever.
Thank you, Ryan. I mean, your expertise would be very valuable in helping with the things that we cannot do, and you know the standards and how to help him navigate that. I think that was an area that was obvious, I think, to all of us.
Chairman, I'm glad to help out as well. I think I'm on bar number 4 at this point in Sandusky, so I've got a little bit of knowledge of what we got to do.
We'll
I
pull
think
you
Brian
in.
started the bars downtown. Actually.
This might be my fault, but
Are we ready to jump on a new business real quick? I'll be real short.
Okay.
I heard comments when I talked to people throughout the last 2 weeks of the need. I mean, Joe addressed this. I think, Alan, you addressed it with me when we talked a little bit about, you brought up the question of what happens when there's a vacant lot within the historic district. Does Landmark have any influence over the type of building that goes up? Should we be involved in that? I think that's a great point. Tom, do we have any applications that we have in hand right now for April? Okay, then that means we have no applications on the April agenda. Why don't we devote the April agenda to talking through some of these issues? And Tom, maybe it would be possible to get Jonathan in on that meeting. I think that would be helpful too, so that we can kind of all get on the same page of what are some of the issues that we're dealing with? How can we improve the process? Tom, you there? Okay. So why don't we reach out to Jonathan and see if he can join us at that April meeting for a discussion? Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, Tom, do you have any other reports to give us? Well, then we need a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman. Oh, no.
Go ahead, Mike.
I have a motion and I think a second in there. Is that right? Sounds like we're adjourned, gentlemen. Thanks for your patience this evening and your help.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great night.
Take care.
Good night.